The customer is not a beta tester. When he pays his money for one of these things, he isn't signing up to be part of a beta testing program. Absolutely beggars belief. I didn't think this saga could get any worse. But wait, it gets better and better. And I noticed this here in red letters. Absolutely mind-boggling. So what have we got here? We've got an Atari 130XE, which came in about 2 weeks ago for a series of upgrades. It's got Ultimate 1 MB, it's got Sophia 2, it's got the DVI connector on the back, it's got audio out, and if you plug the 3.5mm jack in here, it cuts out the audio to the legacy port. It's also got a Spectre AV video upgrade in it as well, and the customer also purchased SIDE3, and he purchased an SIO to PC as well. So he's fully kitted out and fully sorted. I'll get this cartridge in. That's one of the first problems with this particular revision of SIDE3 is to get the damn thing to go in the back of the machine. It's a very, very poor fit. So I finished the machine last night, and today anyway, having just updated the Ultimate 1 MB firmware with the SIDE3 plugin and what have you, I went about the task of updating the SIDE3 loader to the latest version, even though it had 0.69 on it. I wanted to update it anyway because I'd fixed a couple of bugs in the Covox player, etc. since then, and I think I fixed a bug in the screensaver, etc, etc. Let's turn the machine on. Now, the first problem that I noticed that periodically happens here, if we just pull the monitor out so we can have a look, is that with the SIDE3 cartridge in it, the machine spontaneously boots to the memory test. So now this can't be good. I have preemptively fitted this machine with a 74 F08 chip instead of the 74 LS08 chip. I do that more or less as a matter of routine now, actually, primarily because half the time SIDE3 of any generation really simply doesn't work in the target machine, and since SIDE3 is kind of the ubiquitous generation of SIDE cartridge now, and there's a high chance that somebody's going to buy one later on after the fact, even after I've got paid and sent it back, I put the chip in anyway, and in 99% of cases it fixes the problem, and it preemptively fortifies the machine in the event of it having a SIDE3 cartridge plugged into it at some unspecified point in the future. So that's the first problem I noticed. So what the customer ended up with here anyway is a SIDE 3.2. Now you can recognise a SIDE 3.2. I'll take the back off here because it's got a purple PCB. So there's our SIDE 3.2 there with a purple PCB, and I can plug this in the back without the case on it actually, because that'll be useful for reasons that will become apparent in a moment. I think I'll plug the Sophia in here so we've got slightly better video quality as well. So if we can maybe get this thing to start up possibly. So if we go into the loader, if we can see if we can start the loader up. There we go. SIDE3 loader. Now the first thing, I wanted to check the current version of the loader on the cartridge just to make sure it was as expected, and then there it is, version 0.69. But the thing that struck me as odd is the JED version 2.3. Now the only JED versions I'm aware of here are JED 1.0 and JED 1.3, I think it is, or 1.2 and 1.3. So I was a little bit surprised to see 2.3 there. Notice also that the hardware revision is 3.1. I'm sure it should be 3.2 because this is a SIDE 3.2, I believe. So I was scrolling away down the file list here, and something caught my eye as I was scrolling down the file list. Of course, we've got a problem. We've got YUMP appearing among the list of folders, in this particular case at the top of the directory here, or near the top of the directory. So clearly all is not well here. We've got blank lines in the directory. We've got stuff from other menus appearing in the file list. That's one of the entries from the actual volume list there. And pretty much all the time, there we go, we've got some more bogus data in the file list, and if I go back into a folder and come back out of it again, we'll probably pretty consistently see some junk. There we go, it's got some more junk in the file list there. So this is clearly unacceptable. We've got some bullshit here at the bottom of the screen. Now the reason for this, the most likely reason for this, is a DMA RAM to RAM copy operation which has gone awry. For information, when the file list is built by the loader here, when it reads the directory, it keeps a pointer table to the file names and the file records and such like, and because this table can actually get pretty big with the size of the directories that this cartridge can handle, I use a DMA RAM to RAM copy which operates on the SRAM on the cartridge to open up the 2-byte gap in the alpha sorted pointer table when I add a new file entry as it's reading the directory. And this is very fast. Of course, it uses a binary search to find the appropriate slot. It's a simple array of pointers, works very well, it's very, very fast. That's why the loader is able to build a list of alpha sorted files at very, very high speed, even when there's hundreds and hundreds of files on the disk. So I'm assuming it makes the best sense if you've got a bad pointer here. It's probable that what's happened is I've called the DMA RAM to RAM copy to open up a gap in the pointer table, and it's gone wrong. There's been an error somehow. The CPU is on. We see we've got a right bracket there. What the hell is that? Now the problem is here with this is that I've already replaced the 74LS08 chip in the computer with the 74F08 chip, which is kind of the routine step to prepare the machine for SIDE3. I've sourced the O2, the PHI2 signal for the ultimate 1 megabyte. I've sourced it from the BO2 signal at the back of the machine near the ECI connector, rather than straight from the CPU, because we've got the 74F08 chip in there, so that's going to produce the BO2 signal on pin 3, I think. So it's kind of a belt and braces approach to stabilising the machine. It all worked just great until I plugged this SIDE3 cartridge in. So I'm left with the question, what on earth am I going to do about this so that the customer gets a working system? Well, remember I mentioned that JED 2.3 that I'd never seen before earlier in the video. Well, there's a sticker on the back of the PCB here confirming that this is indeed a SIDE 3.2 cartridge, despite the fact that it apparently identifies as a SIDE 3.1. But, well, who are we to question anybody's life choices? But anyway, it's a SIDE 3.2, and it's got a label, JED 210224 Alt. I didn't know there was a relatively new JED update for SIDE 3.2 cartridges, so that was certainly news to me, despite the fact I'm basically the chief software developer for the SIDE 3. But never mind, it's news to me. I've got one of these as well, so it would have been nice, but no, not to worry, I'm not going to hold that against them. So I asked Candle what this new JED actually was for, and I was told that it's for the GoWin equipped boards. So the original SIDE 3 cartridge, SIDE 3.0, had a Lattice CPLD on it. In this position here, this is the quad flat pack chip. So originally it had a Lattice chip. More recently, the Lattice chips have admittedly been a little bit harder to get hold of. There's been supply chain problems with all the COVID with the COVID measures and restrictions. So the SIDE 3.2 is equipped with a GoWin chip, which is a kind of a work-alike. I've just recently had a look at the advertising blurb for these things. I've known since last year that a few of these boards had the GoWin chips on them. But this one, anyway, that the customer bought from the Brewing Academy has the GoWin chip on it instead of the Lattice chip. And apparently this JED update is specific to the GoWin boards. And the purpose of the update was to tweak some timing, to improve timing and improve stability, apparently. And that was done earlier in the year. As I say, I was completely oblivious to that, despite the fact I've got one of these things. but that's what that's for. So, and it is in fact specific to the GoWin equipped boards. So that's odd, since these timing improvements don't seem to have done much for it in the customer's machine here, because it doesn't really work reliably at all, even though I've pre-stabilized everything. So that's kind of weird. So anyway, the question remains, what on earth am I going to do about this? I've finished the machine. Obviously I want to get paid. I want to get it posted back to the customer. What on earth can I do to try and rectify this problem? I thought maybe I could hook up the O2 signal, maybe from a different point on the board, use the pin 39 of the CPU instead of the buffered signal. I tried that, that didn't make any difference. I thought about putting the original 74 LSO8 chip back in the machine. I tried that and I just got a black screen. The thing wouldn't even boot after that, so I thought this is just getting worse. It's not better. So I undid those changes, so we're kind of back to square one now, and I thought, well, I've got a SIDE 3.2 and here it is, and I haven't used it much because I actually prefer my original SIDE 3 just because it always works in every machine I put it in somehow. But I've got a SIDE 3.2 here, and this has got the original, well, the JED 1.3 on it, of course. And I thought, well, why don't I try, if we boot the machine, what I could do here, I had a bright idea. What we'll do is we'll put, oh, and it's booted to the memory test again. Oh dear, let's try that again. See if we can get into the loader. There we go. It decided to work this time. So I had this bright idea. What I could do is flash the 1.3 JED, abandon this update, which doesn't seem to be doing anything good, and we'll flash the 1.3 JED using the programmer that I wrote. So I went looking for my, if I just step through this corrupted directory here, oh dear me, we'll look for the SIDE3 JED flasher here, and I think it's there. There it is. So there, SIDE3 JED 1.3.xex. I can just run this, downgrade the JED to the one that probably works, and everybody's happy. So we'll run that, and oh, update failed, unknown FPGA. So yes, I probably forgot to update the flasher for the GoWin chip, because maybe the GoWin chip's got different ID codes in JEDEC mode. It's probably got a different ID, so I need to update the flasher, and when I update the flasher, I'll be able to downgrade the board without using the Lattice cable. Great! So I went and I googled the GoWin chips, and I found the feature document, the PDF, and then I managed to find the data sheet for that particular chip that's on this board. Brilliant. But I was chatting with Candle about it just to make sure that it was going to be okay to downgrade this, and apparently the GoWin chips aren't software flashable at all at the moment. So even this, if this recognised the chip, it wouldn't be able to flash it. Well, that's no problem, because I've got the Lattice programming cable, because I've been intricately involved in development of this thing for nearly 4 years now. I've got the platform cable for the Lattice ICs, so I'll just plug that into the JTAG connector on the SIDE 3 cartridge, plug the other end of the computer, run the Lattice software, and then we'll downgrade the JED and it'll work. And the customer, apparently need a different cable. The Lattice cable doesn't work with the GoWin chips. Right, okay. So I need the cable. Now, of course, I know what you're thinking, John. It could be the computer. You've just finished working in this computer, and it could actually be the computer that's at fault. A fault somewhere in the Ultimate 1 megabyte installation or something like that. Well, I thought exactly the same thing, because I always like to check myself. Pride comes before a fall, etc., etc. So I dug out my SIDE 3.0 cartridge here, which has got exactly the same loader on it, and I plugged it into the customer's machine here, turned it on, press the L key. We'll have to wait for this monitor to latch onto the DVI signal. Right, let's go in here, let's go in there. And I want my card, of course, and get my card. Pop the card in. And I'm looking for corruption in the directory here, and right, Right. Surely it's going to mess up at some point, because if the computer's got something wrong with it, and no. Go back to the root directory. It would have showed up by now. So I want to see some garbage. No, there's no garbage in the root directory. Right. Now this cartridge, this SIDE 3.0 cartridge, is from probably, well, if not 2019, 2020. Well, it'll be 2020. It'll be a production cartridge from 2020, September or thereabouts. It is now 2024. This SIDE 3.2 cartridge is the third generation of hardware, full of improvements and enhancements and redesigns, and the PLL came and went, and then it came again or whatever, and it got took off, and now it's back, I don't know. And umpteen JED updates, and a special fine-tuned timing enhanced JED update specifically for the GoWin chip, and it doesn't work as well in this machine as the cartridge that's 3 years older with the older JED file on it. Well, let's not draw any conclusions just yet. We need to double check our work here. So let's get my 600XL here. Right, now this is my daily driver 600XL here. It's been recently refitted actually, and when I refitted it, oddly enough, I discovered that it didn't even have a 74F08 chip in it. It still had the original 74LS08 chip in it, even though this machine has been used since 2019 for development and testing of all the SIDE 3 cartridge revisions and all the different versions of the loader, among other machines, because I've got a large collection here, but primarily because I love this machine. It's got Ultimate in it, and it's got VBXE. This is the daily driver machine. It's absolutely rock solid. All the revisions of the SIDE 3 cartridge worked in this machine. Absolutely fine. So this is my SIDE 3.0. So we'll go in here and we'll just show you that that works. There we go. So this SIDE 3, no corruption in the FAT directory, no problems whatsoever. Brilliant. So let's take the customer's SIDE 3, and if there's a problem with the XE computer, we should see no problem at all with this one. So let's go into the loader on this machine, and we'll have a look and see what we've got. Well, it looks alright so far. That looks okay. Oh dear, we've got a gap in the directory there. That doesn't bode well at all. Let's go into a folder and come back out again. See what that one looks like. Oh, yeah, that one's not too bad. Alright, let's come back out and go into the root directory again. Oh no, we've got some crap in the, oh dear, it's all gone wrong. So the cartridge exhibits pretty much all the same problems in this computer as it does on the client's XE machine. So I don't think we can say it's the host machine's fault. So we've really got a quandary in our hands now. But there's another variable which I hadn't explored yet, and that is the Ultimate 1MB boards here. Now this board belongs to an acquaintance of mine who buys a lot of Ultimate 1MB boards, and he was voluntarily sending me contributions towards the firmware because he was buying the stock versions of the board and flashing the firmware himself. And I thought, I considered that very generous of him to send me contributions directly. But anyway, it later became apparent that he was buying them in absolutely enormous quantities and upgrading the machines and selling them on eBay. So fair's fair. He's running a bit of an operation there, and he wants to pay for what he considers the firmware's worth, which is fine, and it's very, very greatly appreciated. So he was buying a lot of Ultimate 1MB boards. And anyway, about a month ago or a little bit more, Jakob of Retro Lemon happened to mention in chat that, oh, did you know your firmware has a compatibility issue with the latest Ultimate 1MB boards?
Oh shit, here we go again.
And of course I thought, what the hell are you talking about? Because it wouldn't be the first time that firmware has been blamed for all kinds of problems. Usually, speciously, almost always in fact, because I did find a bug in a recent video in fact, and when I find a bug I tell you about it and I fix it. But anyway, it turned out that it was my acquaintance who had bought some Ultimate 1MB boards, and he'd had some problems. He'd had some birdies on the screen, some sort of antic DMA corruption and that sort of stuff, all kinds of problems with his SIDE 3. that he hadn't had before when he'd bought Ultimate boards and upgraded them himself with my firmware. So I was very interested indeed, so I got in touch with my acquaintance directly. I know he doesn't want his name mentioned at all. But in any case, it turns out that the latest revision of the Ultimate 1MB has completely different RAM chips to the older versions. I'll get you an older board so you can see here. This is a white one. I forget the actual brand of SRAM that the boards have always had, going back years and years, probably well over a decade. I forget the brand of RAM, but they've always had them on. I'll flash the brand up on the screen. But anyway, these ones have got Alliance SRAM on them all of a sudden. And moreover, the board's been rerouted a little bit. You'll notice that the crystal for the RTC on the old board has been replaced with an SMD part there. What else we've got? We just got some traces in some slightly different places. Not much has changed really, not a great deal, but we've got some interesting little additions. We've got a new VIA there, which seems to be labelled CAS NH. We've got some little diamond shapes. We've got some little tweaks on the board. And different SRAM anyway. So obviously my acquaintance was a bit concerned about this. He thought maybe the different SRAM was causing a problem. And far from being completely unfounded, on further investigation it turned out that even the vendor thought that the SRAM might be a problem. He sent 2 of them up to me for inspection and testing to see if I could replicate the problems he was having. I couldn't replicate the problems he was having as it happened, but he kindly let me keep one of the boards. Needless to say, he hasn't bought many boards since then, but nevertheless, well, I raised merry hell about the whole thing anyway, because it seemed to me that the design had been changed, and although I couldn't replicate the problems, we clearly had somebody who was buying a lot of Ultimate 1MB who was experiencing problems that you'd never experienced before. The assertion that the problem only existed with my firmware flashed to the board was completely preposterous, and I told Jakob about that, and he seemed to think that I was taking things a bit too seriously. But I have to say, I'm absolutely sick and tired of this kind of bullshit being propagated about firmware and just basic pat assumptions being made with no particular technical insight whatsoever about what's to blame for this and what works and what doesn't. The problems that my acquaintance was experiencing with these SRAM chips, or so he thought anyway, would have been equally prevalent elsewhere. It just so happens that it was easier to spot with my firmware because it's got a black screen at the beginning when you turn the machine on. It's got a load and progress bar. Turns out the Ultimate board that I've put in this machine is also one of the boards with the Alliance SRAM. Now, one thing that I noticed on this board is actually a cut trace here, which goes to the 5V pin of the OS-ROM connector, and then it comes all the way along here and it goes down to C5, the left hand side of the C5 capacitor there. Now that trace has been cut, but it's been cut at both ends of the trace with a knife by the look of it. So that's very interesting indeed. It isn't actually isolated at this end, if we get the continuity tester on it. And of course there's some vias going through the board off this trace. So there's a cut here, and there's a cut here, which you probably can't see very well. But anyway, I'll beep test there. Now we've got continuity, despite the fact there's a cut there, we've got continuity going to the trace. I've just scraped the solder mask off a little bit. So that cut there didn't work. It didn't sever the trace from the 5V line. So we've got 5V is going all the way along here, all the way along here, until it gets to this cut. Now this cut here did work. So 5V has been isolated from the left hand side of C5, but it hasn't been isolated from any of these little vias going along the rest of the trace here. And we can only assume that the assumption was that it would be if the thing's been cut here. So what was the strategy here? To put 2 cuts on the trace and hope one worked? At least, I don't know. I don't understand this. Anyway, I looked into this situation a little bit more closely. Why is there a cut trace on the board? And it turns out that the reason that the trace is cut on the board is because there's been a diode bodged onto the other side of the board here. So if we look at this top side of the board here, if we look there, you can probably just see it catching the light. There is a diode there, and it's not labelled, it's not on the silk screen. It's actually just soldered over probably two scraped off bits of solder mask, and that is on that same rail apparently. And that's why the traces are cut at the back. Now, what is the purpose of this diode, I hear you ask? Well, the purpose of the diode apparently is to limit the 5-volt supply to these Alliance SRAMs, because the vendor thought there was a problem, or a potential problem. So my acquaintance, yes, he wasn't seeing things. There was potential for an issue, and I didn't even notice this bodge when he sent me the 2 boards for inspection, but it just so happens that at least the one I've kept that he gave to me has this diode on it and the cut traces on the other side. Now, the purpose of this apparently is to limit the 5-volt supply to the 2 Alliance SRAMs here to about 4.3 or 4.6 volts, because apparently they didn't interact well with TTL signals, or so was assumed, without this modification to the board after the fact. This is most interesting indeed. So of course the first thing I did here, since the ultimate board that I put into the customer's machine, this machine here, although it is ostensibly identical to this one, complete with the little diamond and the CAS via and all that sort of stuff, so it's the same board, same RAM, but it didn't have the cut trace on the other side of the board, and it hasn't got the diode there. So I thought, well, I'll pop this board into his machine and we'll see what happens. And you know how much difference it made? Absolutely fuck all, because it just crashed and screwed up in exactly the same way, regardless of whether the diode is there or not. So it's not the ultimate 1 megabyte. But John, I hear you ask, perhaps you should try an older version of the ultimate board, one that doesn't have those new RAM chips in it at all. Well, that's exactly what I did next. I put an older version of ultimate 1 megabyte in this machine, and it still acted up in exactly the same way when the SIDE3 cartridge was plugged into it. So in complete and utter desperation, I dug out my SIDE 3.2 cartridge, this one here, and it's still got JED 1.3 in it. So I decided what I'd do is I would test my SIDE 3.1 cartridge in this computer and see if it had the same problem, so we can try and deduce basically whether it's a hardware issue or a software issue. So let's turn it on and see what happens. So here we go, SIDE 3, this one it's got exactly the same version of the loader on it as is on this one, because I haven't updated the other one yet. JED version 1.3 still identifies as hardware revision 3.1, so that's all right and proper, but it's got the original JED that was developed for SIDE 3.2 or 3.1. So that's good. So let's see if we can duplicate any problems with this one. Seems to be okay so far. I know these are just topical tests, but I mean, if you can't even get a directory listing on the screen without it being full of all sorts of errors, I don't think you're not going to get much further with anything more complicated. But yeah, it turned out that this one works fine. So the situation is that the problem appears to be the JED file on this board, the customer's board. This February revision 2.3 version JED file. Presumably that's what's causing the trouble with his cartridge. But of course I can't downgrade it because this isn't software flashable and you need a special cable. The Lattice cable won't work and I don't have the cable. So in any case, after much discussion this morning and this afternoon, I think Lotharek has offered to post me a cable out. I've told him that this JED update on this cartridge is a complete and total clusterfuck. Now it's very, very frustrating this, because these candle design devices used to be the absolute gold standard in what was available, in my opinion, and I was absolutely honoured and privileged to be picked back years and well over a decade ago to write the PBI firmware for the Incognito and the Ultimate 1 megabyte. And then of course a few years later I decided to unilaterally rewrite the firmware, write my own version of the firmware, And I put a lot of work and time into that because I actually believed in it, and I thought the software could broaden the scope and increase the capabilities of the hardware because it was such good hardware. So we had a really good reputation at the time. Really, we could do no wrong. Candle stuff was absolutely legendary. I mean, the ultimate 1 megabyte and the incognito. Absolutely, the stuff of legend. But this is the third hardware revision of this device now. And I remember sounding the alarm back in 2020, when it was released in September 2020, I sounded the alarm bells then about the lack of testing. I upset a lot of people saying that, but it's true. It's all very well me testing it, Lotharek testing it, Candle testing it, but unless you've got about, half a dozen at least people outside of the project, end users, who are also going to test it and test it with all their computers. Doesn't matter how many computers I've got in the house, you need to get it tested with other people's computers and other people's houses, with other power supplies and other stuff. But that didn't happen. And we had problems when it first came out. And that's probably half the reason that we're on the third revision of the hardware now. Not just because it's got more SRAM on it, or because it's got a different, cheaper or more readily available CPLD on it. We had to fix problems as well. Some of the revisions were ergonomic ones. We can now have different SRAM chips. We've got more SRAM. We've got BGA footprints for stuff. But we're on the third iteration of the hardware now. I don't know if the expectation is that people just keep replacing the prior versions with the new ones. But anyway, let's assume SIDE 3.2 represents the ultimate version so far of the SIDE 3 hardware. And that it basically works, even though I've probably 60% of the time I've got to put a 74 FO8 chip in every Atari that comes through this workshop, just to get it to work with SIDE 3 of any generation. That's just like a mandatory step. I've got to do that. And even if the customer hasn't got a SIDE 3 and sent it up here, and even if he hasn't said that he's going to use it, I usually put one of those chips in anyway, just in case the machine happens to come in contact with one of these cartridges in the future. Because at least then there's a fairly high chance it's going to work. So with all that in mind, and all those lessons learned from the past about testing, the importance of testing, why on earth would you tweak the JED file, produce a new stabilised and improved JED file designed to tweak a few timings with the GoWin chips that are on these things, not test it, put it on the production boards and let the customer pay £100 or so, send it to me, only for me to find it doesn't work? And not only does it not work, I can't downgrade it to the working JED because the flasher doesn't work and the chip isn't in-field programmable, which I didn't even know. And I can't even go to the drawer, grab the platform cable and update it over USB because the USB cable doesn't work with this chip. This is becoming a complete embarrassment. My name is on here. It says software FJC at atari8.co.uk. This is becoming a complete embarrassment. No wonder when people buy these things and stick them in a stock machine that hasn't been across my desk and doesn't have a 74 FO8 chip in it and find that the damn thing doesn't work half the time, or it misreads the directory. No wonder they're going, oh well, we'll just buy an AVG cart instead because at least that's going to work. And that's at the best of times. But to make matters even worse, you've now produced a JED update that's in the field and can't easily be undone. Are you deliberately trying to trash the reputation earned over years, blood, sweat and tears that were put into this stuff by doing stupid shit like this and not testing anything before you release it? The ultimate 1 megabyte board, even that classic design that as far as I could tell was immune to problems, even that's been faffed about with and it's been bodged up with diodes and sold to people who had no idea that these things had been done. They had no idea that there was new SRAM on the board. So we've got the variable of a redesigned Ultimate 1 megabyte board that may or may not have a couple of cut traces and may or may not have a diode bodged over the top of it. What is the customer supposed to do? At least I'm in a position. Lotharek said he's going to send one of the cables across. Oh, great. So at least I can get the customer to the point where he gets what he paid for. What about the other people who bought them, get the same thing, and it doesn't work for shit? What are they supposed to do? They're supposed to run out and buy a fucking cable as well? Or are you going to send one out for free of charge to everybody who has a complaint? The customer is not a beta tester. When he pays his money for one of these things, he isn't signing up to be part of a beta testing program. Anyway, point being, I really believe in this stuff, and as I say, I've put literally thousands of hours ongoing into working on the loader for this. And a little bit earlier in the year, Lotharek complained about the lack of progress on new hardware, like the external Ultimate 1MB, Incognito Lite, Incognito 3. Not that I've actually got an Incognito 3, nobody thought to send one out yet, so I'm not going to be held responsible for that one. But apparently the only obstacle to these things being released is just to get the firmware done. That's all we need, is the firmware done. Well, answer me this one. If you're going to produce an external device, which is basically a mashup of the Ultimate 1MB and SIDE3, and if you're going to produce an externally PBI connected device, which requires no internal modifications to the machine whatsoever. So this is really going to appeal to people who don't want to modify the machine, who can't solder, who don't want to have to take the lid off and replace a chip so that the thing works. Well, how if this is the stage we're at, if we're still at the point whereby about 60% of the time I've got to fit that chip in the host machine for this thing to work, how on earth are we going to produce external devices that require no internal modifications to the machine if we can't even get this to work on a stock machine? So the story that my not having written the firmware yet is holding up these new devices seems to me like a complete fantasy. Are they going to work? Or are we just going to get in a cycle again where we actually release the stuff and then it doesn't work and I'll get blamed again? It all must be John's firmware. It's a software problem. It's ridiculous. All I've got to do is pop that chip in the board and everything works perfectly. So I really do resent this, and I really do resent having to indulge in endless cycles of customer support concerning hardware that I'm not even responsible for designing or producing. I do the software. That's what I do. I wrote the loader. I wrote the DOS that goes with the loader. Thousands and thousands of lines of assembly language. That's what I did. That's what I get paid for. So I just at this particular juncture in time, until I get this thing fixed and sent back to the customer and the customer's happy, I've got into this mindset where I'm thinking, what is the point? What is the point of spending hour after hour after hour adding a video player to the SIDE3 loader and doing all this endless rewrites to make it auto-mount stuff and auto-mount disk images, all the things I want to do? Do you have any idea how long it took, well, how long it took me to establish myself as somebody who's trustworthy in the Atari community? Well, since 2008, how long's that? 16 years? And if I start to produce crap on a consistent basis, that reputation's going to go down the toilet. Think very, very carefully. Test things before you release them. When people buy things from you and they have a complaint, listen very carefully to what they're saying, because it may be that they're telling the absolute truth, and you may find that the problem being reported by the customers because of something you did, because of a change you made to the software or a change you made to the hardware. Do it now before it's too late, because I can see if this kind of thing continues, nobody's going to want this stuff. Right, so 5 weeks later, and the customer's machine is still here, along with his SIDE3 cartridge, now denuded of its case. So Lotharek offered to order a cable because, of course, the GoWin chip, which is essentially a clone of the Lattice chip, functionally similar or identical, does not work with the programming cable from Lattice. So you need yet another adapter to plug this thing in and downgrade the JED. Lotharek offered to order the cable. I waited about 3 weeks, asked him where it was. I assumed he was just going to get it delivered here at his own expense, because why in the bloody hell should the customer, who's already spent 100 quid or so on this thing and found that it doesn't work the way it's supposed to, for entirely arbitrary reasons, whereby a hastily prepared JED update, totally untested, I wasn't even sent a copy of it to quickly try it on a couple of machines here, even though I'm the one that writes the loader. and I've got to deal with customer inquiries about, oh, well, the loader crashes and it blows up and it doesn't read the card properly. I've got to deal with them. Some of the emails to the actual vendor get deflected back to me on the supposition that it's somehow software related. When the loader blows up or fails to read the card properly, and you take the 74LS08 chip out of the motherboard and put a 74F08 chip in, it completely cures the problem with no software changes whatsoever. That buffer chip being in the motherboard miraculously fixes all the bugs in the software. What a load of bullshit.
Bullshit.
I waited about 3 weeks, asked where this cable was. Oh, well, it takes longer. It can take 2 to 3 weeks. So we got to 4 weeks. Where's the cable? Oh, well, apparently it turned up last Friday at Lotharek's office while he was out. So I thought he was getting it shipped directly here, but obviously not. Now, if you've bought an Ultimate 1 Megabyte or a SIDE3 or an Incognito, you may have noticed that at places like Retro Lemon, lotharek.pl, you can buy the hardware in 2 different flavours when it comes to firmware. You can buy it with the stock firmware, which was written by Candle years and years and years ago, or you can buy it with the FJC firmware that I wrote about 2016, and it was generally approved of by the users, and it enhances the capabilities of the device. And it was Lotharek's idea some years ago, because he obviously desperately wanted to sell the stuff or give the option of being able to buy it with my firmware on, because he thought it would probably move more units and generate more income and more profit. So eventually we hashed an agreement out, and so for every unit that's sold with the SIDE3 firmware, so Ultimate 1 Megabyte, the customer pays about £20 over and above the price of the stock firmware unit, about 11 quid of which comes back to me. What happens to the other half? I don't know. It's calculated in arrears every month. So, for example, in March, so many FJC units will be sold, and Lotharek will total up at the end of March how many were sold, and we know what the unit price is as per the agreement. He sends me the total, and then a couple of hours later he sends the money, wires it through straight to the bank. Now I, of course, produce an invoice retroactively, having worked out and extrapolated the overall license cost and how that works out per unit, and I put that on an invoice for the HMRC should they ever wish to look at it. Goes on my tax records and my accounts on the server here, and at the end of the year I do a self-assessment and I declare all of this: tips, PayPal tips, coffee tips, Patreon income and firmware licenses all go down as taxable income at the end of the year. But anyway, May's commission was now due. It was overdue, in fact. It was about the 25th of June. These things used to be paid in the first or second week of the month, and then it was the second week of the month and the third week of the month. Commonly it's about the 21st now. It was overdue, so I asked about it, and I had a tremendous fanny on trying to get the money paid. It came to about 90 quid for 8 units because it hadn't been a very good month, but eventually that was paid, and I asked about the cable, and apparently the cable could not be forwarded because reasons. So I was talking to Candle the other night about all this, explaining that I was still no further forward getting the JED downgraded on this thing, and Candle made a very interesting suggestion that I never really considered before. Why not replace the GoWin CPLD on the board with a Lattice CPLD? Now, it just so happens that I have a prototype SIDE3 here that had a Lattice chip on it. So sure, this may not have been the most sensible thing to do. I think had I known that obtaining a programming cable to downgrade this thing using the GoWin platform would be such a total logistical impossibility 5 or 6 weeks ago, I would have just told the customer to RMA the device is not working. I did a lot of surface mount work swapping various chips on these boards when we were first developing the SIDE3 cartridge, so it didn't really faze me, the idea of taking the GoWin chip off the board and replacing it with a Lattice CPLD. And I did that on Wednesday morning. Took the GoWin chip off, replaced it with the Lattice chip from the prototype board. Now, Candle was very helpful throughout, and there were a couple of jumpers there to cater for a couple of differing signals on the GoWin CPLD. So once again, there's the GoWin, and there is the Lattice CPLD. Now, the 2 position switch died in the conflict, but that's no problem. We can replace that easily enough, so I've just taken it off for the time being. Chip's gone on lovely, no shorts. And then, of course, having done this, what this enables me to do is plug in the Lattice platform cable, put the cartridge in the back of the machine, turn it on, and then we can write JED 1.3 to the Lattice chip, and everything should just work. Great. The only problem is it doesn't. The cartridge is now completely dead. No registers in the CCTL area at D500. Nothing whatsoever. I've been over the board with a fine-tooth comb. Can't see what's wrong with it. I've verified that it's the correct JED. It programs and verifies absolutely fine. So something that we've missed is going on here. I've yet to see a board of this variety that actually has a Lattice chip on it. So I don't know, maybe somebody's forgotten something, or maybe I've done something wrong and not realised, I don't know. But it's absolutely stone dead. I'll spend a little bit of time trying to figure it out, but this is now an ornament at the moment. The other thing as well, which worries me, is that there is actually another difference between these two boards that Candle spotted that I missed, and that is the buffer ICs along the bottom here. So all the signals on the cartridge port here come through these buffer chips. Now, on Candle stuff, I've seen two different kinds of buffer chips used in the past, and I do remember some troubleshooting session years ago where we did a buffer swap to alleviate an issue. So these things can actually make a difference. Now, I think Candle had spec'd or was expecting to see the buffer chips on the... This is my cartridge, and this is the older one. But Lotharek appears to have changed brands again at some point and is now using a different brand of buffer chip.
What could possibly go wrong?
So the two differences between the cartridge on the left and the cartridge on the right, what was initially the JED on the GoWin CPLD and the buffer chips along the bottom. Other than that, they should be absolutely identical. So now we have a Lattice chip on the board. We've got these buffers. Now I could try and swap the buffer chips, take the buffers off perhaps one of these prototype boards and put them on here. But is there any point? I think I'd prefer to see at least some signs of life from this cartridge, even if it didn't work correctly and it maybe had timing problems. Then I would be perfectly happy to swap the buffer chips. But at the moment it is absolutely stone dead. Now, the whole point of all this work, misguided though it may be, was simply to provide the customer with what he paid for and what he expected, which was a fully working system with Sophia, Ultimate 1 MB, and a SIDE3 cartridge. In retrospect, had I known it was going to take this long to get a cable that still hasn't turned up yet and has no hope of doing so, I would have just told him to send it back. But the problem with that approach is that he would either then just get his money back, or you would get a load of argument from the vendor claiming that the thing was okay. So if you RMA a device to Lotharek and he plugs this with the original CPLD and JED on it into his computer and it works there, he's going to basically say that you're a liar, I would imagine, and say, well, it works fine, how can you say it must be your computer that's at fault? Well, I've upgraded this computer and there's absolutely fuck all wrong with it. And we know that because when I put my GoWin SIDE3 cart into it, it works perfectly fine. And yet it doesn't work with this one. And even if you got a swapped cartridge, I'm fairly certain that unless there was a defect on this thing before I started to mess around with it, the one he gets back is going to be exactly the same. Now that might work with other people's computers. It might work for you if you buy one. Hopefully it does, but it doesn't work in this computer and it doesn't work in my 600XL. It sort of works, but we get corruption when it tries to read the FAT directory, and if you try to load a 1 MB cartridge image, it crashes because it didn't read the file properly. So that's the situation, and that's what I've been trying to work towards. I've kept the customer up to date all this time, of course, and I've now revealed to him that I've basically wrecked his cartridge entirely and it doesn't even work to any extent at all. Needless to say, this has voided the warranty completely. I can't send this back as faulty now, no doubt. I'm going to have to buy the guy a new cartridge. I'm going to have to pay him to buy a new cartridge, probably by waiving the fee on the work that I've done on this machine. Then I can throw this in the bin or keep it for parts, and it'll be entirely up to the customer whether he wants to use the money he saved on not paying for the work to buy another SIDE3 cartridge, which will probably be identical to this one, or maybe he'll just abandon the whole idea entirely and buy an AVG or a FujiNet and probably have a happy time. What a fantastic outcome this is. I get no money for the work I've done on here. This has stopped working for reasons entirely unknown, just because I put a working, known good Lattice chip on it, and it's now pretty much fit for the bin. And this is a very unfortunate situation here, because this kind of basic installation, Ultimate 1 megabyte, maybe some video upgrade, and the SIDE3, is pretty much my bread and butter when it comes to upgrade jobs. Obviously I do repairs as well, and obviously I develop the firmware, and I make videos, and I've got patrons and all that sort of thing. That's where my income comes from. Now if a customer comes along and says, oh, I'd like you to put Ultimate 1 megabyte in the machine, a VBXE, or a Spectre AV, or a Sophia, and a SIDE3, what I invariably told them was that if you're going to provide the parts yourself, which I prefer the customer to do, send the SIDE3 cartridge in with the machine, because I want to test it in the computer after I've put the upgrades in and make any adjustments to the host machine that are necessary to make the thing work reliably for you, so that when you pay, you get back something which is verified to work reliably on my desk, and presumably will work reliably on the customer's desk. So that was the basic requirement, but that's not such a big deal. It's no problem to put the SIDE3 cartridge in the box. And on those occasions where the customer wants me to buy the stuff, obviously I get the SIDE3 through my hands, and I can make any changes that are required. However, if this is symptomatic of the behavior of GoWin SIDE3 cartridges with JED 2.3, that basic job suddenly becomes a completely intimidating nightmare situation. Simply popping a 74 F08 into the host machine's motherboard is no longer guaranteed to result in a working system. And the only solution could be to downgrade the JED on the cartridge, but I can't do it because I haven't got the cable. Now, something tells me I'm going to need one of those cables going forward, so whether or not Lotharek comes through and actually produces this cable, I don't know. But regardless of that, I'm probably going to end up having to buy one. So, I'm going to be out of pocket to replace this SIDE3 cartridge, and I'm going to have to purchase a GoWin platform cable at my own expense, just so that I can unilaterally fix these non-working SIDE3 cartridges if and when they have I/O problems and DMA issues on the host machine. So not only will I make no money on this particular job, I'll actually be running at a loss because I've had to put my hand in my pocket to buy a fucking cable. Okay, a couple of weeks has passed here, and this is the customer's SIDE 3.2 cartridge, onto which I attempted to transplant a Lattice CPLD to try and get the thing working. And as I said, it didn't work. And after about a week of periodic discussion with Candle on the topic, because it doesn't look like Lotharek's speaking to me anymore, he hasn't read the last lot of WhatsApp messages I sent, so Candle even kindly sent the schematic and the board view across so I could have a look at it and see if anything had gone wrong. So the thing just wouldn't work with a Lattice CPLD on it. Now, it occurred to me to ask the question, has this ever been tested? Has this revision of SIDE3 board ever actually had a Lattice CPLD installed on it? And it's very clear from the schematics that it was designed to accommodate both kinds of chip, regardless of whether it's theoretically possible by moving a couple of jumper resistors on the board. Has it actually been done, and has it been observed to work with a Lattice CPLD on it? Well, the answer to that was not as far as I know. So it doesn't look like anybody's tried to put a Lattice CPLD on this particular board revision. Well, I've certainly tried to do it, and I did it very competently as well, and it didn't work. So what I decided to do was to take the GoWin CPLD, put it back on the board, and reorganize the jumpers so that it was set up for the GoWin CPLD, and then at least we'd be back to square one, pretty much where we were before. Put the GoWin chip back on it, moved the jumpers back, and it didn't work. It was still dead. And actually, when I was testing the board after the fact, I found a dead short across a capacitor. So I took the CPLD off, I took the GoWin CPLD back off the board. I've told the owner of the board what's been going on, by the way. He's highly entertained by it, I suppose. Just as well he's not in a hurry for his computer. But anyway, there was a dead short across VCC and ground, and when I took the CPLD off and tested it, the short appears to be in the GoWin CPLD. So the act of removing the GoWin CPLD, putting it to one side, and then putting it back on the board, killed it. So what I ended up doing, rather than killing, because of course I took the Lattice CPLD, came from an old prototype SIDE3, which I rather like. So I took the Lattice chip off the customer's board and I put it back on this prototype board, which is the one where I'd nicked the CPLD from in the first place. You can say this is a prototype because it doesn't have the gold plating on the edge connector there. Put it back on here. I had to work on it for a couple of hours. There was some other issues with the SRAM and stuff. I'd swapped the SRAM chip about 5 years ago when we were designing this thing, working on it. Didn't do a very good job of that, so I've cleaned it all up, and now this cartridge works again. So at least, although I've appeared to have killed the customer's cartridge by following the advice to swap the CPLD for a Lattice chip, rather than just sending the damn thing back, at least my stock of SIDE3 cartridges, of which I have I think 4 now, is not depleted, so that's something. Now you may ask, why not just give this one to the customer? The reason I didn't want to do that, not least because I didn't really want to get rid of this one. I've got one of each revision of SIDE3 cartridge, and bear in mind I do develop the firmware for it, so it's handy to be able to test updates on each board revision here. But it has a little bit of sentimental value to it. It's a prototype. Of course, they only had the 2 megabytes of RAM in those days, and I'm not too comfortable about providing a warranty on a 5-year-old pre-production board. More than that, I was absolutely determined to get to the bottom of this JED issue, you see. So what I've done is, out of my own pocket, I've ordered another SIDE3 from Retro Lemon under strict instructions that it must be the same type, i.e. JED 3.2 that the customer purchased, but well, that's the only stock there is at Retro Lemon, so that was not a problem. And it arrived the other day. Here is the proof of purchase, SIDE3, order date the 2nd of July 2024. And that is £102.95 with free delivery and VAT included. So this is identical, or should be identical, to the customer unit that the customer himself provided. So why don't we plug it into his computer and see how it behaves. Right, well, it's booted straight to the memory test, unfortunately. Oh dear me. Right, let's wiggle it around a little bit, see if we can get that to sort itself out. Try again. There we go, we're in the loader now. Excellent. Right, so at least this one works. At least this one isn't dead. So let's see if we can duplicate the issue that we had with the... Oh dear, we've got directory corruption here. In the FAT directory, so it does indeed look as if this one is behaving exactly the same as the other one. We've got the time and date has appeared in the root directory there. It almost looks as if, because these particular items in the menu all have a data type, an ID byte in the record in memory that tells the loader how it should be displayed. So really you can mix and match if you wanted to, or if there was any reason to do so. You could mix and match the different data types, menus, settings, toggles, time and date, and that sort of thing. You could mix and match them in a single menu. It's not a question of which menu you're in that dictates how things are displayed. It's how the actual data item itself, how the record is identified. It may actually not be a bad pointer. It may be that the simple act of the CPU putting the information into the SRAM on the cartridge has resulted in data corruption, which is even more interesting again. So it might not actually be the RAM-to-RAM DME copy that is causing the problem, but a communication issue between the CPU and the SRAM on the computer. That would almost make more sense, actually. But anyway, that's what we've got. So we've got some nonsense here. It's just a complete mess. I can't warranty this as a working system. So let's have another look again. I know we've done it already. We'll just double check here. We'll take my SIDE 3.2 cartridge and plug it in the machine and go into the loader with the same card and the same software, and we'll scroll through the menu there, and we see no problems whatsoever. Absolutely no garbage, nothing at all. So that works. So that's my SIDE 3.2 cartridge. Right, so we're back basically where we were to start with. But wait, it gets better and better. Now, I just happened to check Lotharek's SIDE3 page today, and I noticed this here in red letters. If you have 3.2 revision received before the 20th of February, I'm assuming this means 2024, please send unit back for reflashing. Please follow RMA procedure at the top of the page. And there's a link to the services and returns policy. And then underneath we've got how to determine if your SIDE 3.2 needs flashing. And we have a picture right here. Now, this is interesting. So this is a SIDE 3.2 PCB, and it's got, as you can see up here, it's got a GoWin CPLD on it. And it's pictured sort of sideways on, so there's the SD card slot. And there's a capacitor here, C30. And it says at the bottom here, if your board does not have C30, so it's unpopulated or removed in this case here, your SIDE 3.2 is okay. Now that's interesting. Now it makes no mention of the fact that the SIDE 3.2s which have JED 2.3 applied to them have a sticker on the back to that effect, and the sticker happens to have basically the same date on it as this one here. So why don't we have a look at the new cartridge to see, in light of what Lotharek has posted on that RMA invitation on his website. Let's have a look here and see if it actually has the capacitor in question, and thus whether or not it needs to be sent back to the manufacturer for correction. Right, so the component we are looking for is C30, and that should be up here, and oh, it's not there. So this cartridge is okay, according to Lotharek's website. This one's fine, and it doesn't need to be sent back. So it appears that if the capacitor isn't there, it follows, as night follows day, that it's going to have that sticker on the back, and it's going to have JED 2.3 on it. And as a consequence, nothing needs to be done, because this one apparently works. But it doesn't work. How can this be? Do I have to send it back? I'm confused. So let's have a look at my SIDE 3.2 cartridge, PCB. This is the one I've had for a year or so, probably over a year. The production sample. For a working cartridge, we're looking at something that doesn't have C30 populated. But the funny thing is, this one does have C30 populated. There it is, it's got a capacitor on it. So does this mean this one needs to be sent back? But this one does work. It works fine. It works in my computers, it works in the customer's machine, and it's got the capacitor on it. And as we already know, it's got JED 1.3 on it. I'm so confused. Do I need to send this back, this working cartridge back to Lotharek to get it updated so that it works like the customer's board or the one that I've just bought, i.e. the one that doesn't work, the two that don't work? It's so confusing. This one works, and it's got the capacitor on it. By the way, I bought the cable. Candle finally kindly provided a link to an Amazon cable, so it's coming from America, and I've paid £23 for that, plus £5 shipping. So Lotharek, you owe me 28 quid. I may have to put the capacitor back. I mean, why not? I'm sure I can find a capacitor to put on this board. I've probably got some ceramic caps floating around, so I might even put the capacitor back on when I downgrade the JED on here. Of course, I haven't got the cable yet, so I can't actually show you what happens, but I'm 99.99% sure that when I downgrade the JED on this board, it's going to work. It'll work in my computer, and it'll work in the customer's computer. The customer can pay for the labour that's done on the machine, and he's even kind enough to make some sort of contribution to the extra work that I've had to do on here. I mean, he's even happy to cover the cost of the damn cable. But why should he cover the cost of the cable? Lotharek should cover the cost of the cable. And he's had the cable, the more expensive one apparently, that came direct from this German distributor. They did have a lead time on it, so it's hardly surprising that it took 4 weeks to turn up. But that was about 3 weeks ago, and I still haven't received the damn thing. He's completely lost interest in solving this issue. But not only has he lost interest in solving this issue, he has no fucking idea what he's doing, because he's recalled the cartridges, by my standard, work to replace them with the cartridges that don't work. And if you have bought a SIDE 3.2 prior to February 2024, and it has the capacitor on it, and it doesn't have the sticker on the back, it's got JED 1.3 on it, you are now invited, whether it works or not, to send it back to Lotharek under the terms of the warranty to get it fixed so that it works like this piece of shit. So not only does it look like Retro Lemon's entire stock of SIDE3 cartridges, but of SIDE 3.2, not only does it look like that entire stock of SIDE 3.2 cartridges being poisoned with this JED 2.3, which I can't get to work reliably on the customer's machine or on my own machine. An absolutely unprecedented situation in 5 years of working on this project, by the way. So not only is that entire stock polluted with that JED, the ones that worked got sent back to Poland to be upgraded to JED 2.3 and probably knock that capacitor off the board. But not only that, if you happen to run into the RMA request on Lotharek's website, which I notice isn't very well publicised, I couldn't find any mention of it on his social media. The guy doesn't participate in forums because, it must upset him sometimes. So his only real means of publicising anything is on his Facebook page, his company Facebook page, lotharek.pl. I went back scrolling through about 5 or 6 months of posts. I couldn't find anything on there. Maybe I've missed it. If you can find it, let me know. I couldn't find anything on there that publicised this problem, or this perceived problem that he sees, whereby if you've got the older type, which I would regard as the working type, with capacitor C30 populated and JED 1.3 on the board, he's telling you to send it back and get it fixed because it needs JED 2.3 on it to make it work properly. Absolutely beggars belief. I didn't think this saga could get any worse. And when I first read that thing on his website, what I assumed it was actually saying, bearing in mind I've been in touch with him about this problem. I've told him about the problems that I've had here. I've told Jakob about the problems that I've had here. I've told Candle about the problems that I'm having with these cartridges. I assumed that what was written in red letters would say, if you've purchased a SIDE 3.2 after February 2024, well, we're fucked up. We put JED 2.3 on them and we took this capacitor off. Please send it back because there's a 50-50 chance you're going to have some sort of issue with it. It isn't going to work stably. Send it back here, free of charge. We'll downgrade the JED for you, put 1.3 back on. That's the only sensible thing to do because JED 1.3 has been around for 2 or 3 years now. It is such utter madness to cook up a tweaked JED to put on the CPLD in a matter of days or weeks. Have one person tested on his desk, Lotharek tested on his desk using whatever computer he's using to test it with, and then ship it out to all the vendors with a platform with a chip on the cartridge that you can't flash in field. Even Retro Lemon doesn't have the equipment to fix the problem or the perceived problem. So he's obviously got no cable. He's got no way to change the JED on the cartridge. He can't do an in-place upgrade or downgrade of the JED. They have to go back to Poland. It is absolutely mind-boggling. That's how I read the message at first, sort of subconsciously. I thought, he must be... Oh, no. He's doing the exact opposite. The exact opposite. He wants to take the ones that, in my opinion, work okay, and he wants you to send them back. There's another thing I've noticed here, which is SIDE 2.5. So here we've got a post on his social media from July 2023. Now, SIDE 2.5, as far as I know, it's some sort of mashup between SIDE 2 and SIDE 3. It's got an SD card slot and a USB connector. You can use a pen drive in it. Of course, it's also going to have the ECI adapter, so you can actually provide extra memory. So a bit sort of EVG-like here. I'll tell you another thing it calls to mind is the SIDE 3 wing that was supposed to be brought out, God knows when, 2 years ago or something, which was going to give SIDE 3 the capability of acting as a RAM upgrade and a PBI-enabled hard disk controller. Nothing ever happened to that. People were buying the thing thinking, well, where's my SIDE 3 wing? Well, it doesn't exist yet. You can't buy it. I wonder why that is. I wonder why you can't buy the SIDE 3 wing. But now, SIDE 2.5, which will act as a standalone memory upgrade. That's very interesting, that. And the other interesting thing about SIDE 2.5 is that I'm not involved in it in any way, shape or form. I've never worked on any firmware for it. I'm assuming Candle's done the whole thing in-house. Isn't that interesting? So if this thing starts to sell instead of SIDE 3, I won't receive any money at all. Oh, look at this as well. This is SIDE 3 issues thread, which is now up to 4 pages here. So I asked this person who was having issues what JED he had on the board, and of course, look, it's JED 2.3 and he was having issues there. So I've written here on June the 19th, as far as I can tell, pretty much all SIDE3 stock from all official vendors is now equipped with GoWin CPLDs and JED 2.3, correct? And then I go into a bit of the background information here, which I've already covered in the video. And then a few weeks have gone by, and this particular one, he's looking for a 74F08 chip to get his SIDE3 to work, hopefully, theoretically, possibly. And he can't find one, so I've offered to send him one there. And I've remarked that why not put one of these chips, as they're so cheap. I mean, they're less than $1 for a 74F08 chip. Why not put one in the box? Why not just put one in the box in case it's needed, just for an extra quid? Eh? Why not? Because they won't do that, will they? They want you to buy the O2 fixer instead, which is complete overkill for the problem at hand. Utter, total overkill. In fact, now I think about it, it wouldn't be beyond the realms of possibility if Lotharek's test machine had the O2 fixer and a 64K SRAM board in it. Wouldn't that be interesting? So he's tweaked the thing so that it works with the O2 fixer and the 64K SRAM board.
Not a great plan.
And if your cartridge doesn't work, all you got to do is buy the O2 fixer for 15 quid. Oh, and then it'll probably work. Wouldn't just send you a 74F08 chip. Well, there wouldn't be much point because with JED 2.3 in it, not even that'll make the fucking thing work. Right, this is very exciting indeed. We have our cable, our GoWin platform cable. I haven't opened it yet. I've decided to do this on camera. So let's have a look at it. So this arrived in about a week, I would say. And I'm hoping that there's going to be some instructions inside concerning driver installation and such like, because I can imagine that being a potential headache. Now this is the one that ClownStrike recommended I get. Don't forget, it's a lot cheaper than the kind of the official one, if you like. And that does indeed look the part. So there's our little cable there, which I'm no doubt going to have to make a special cable for this, of course, so that it attaches to the JTAG header on the cartridge. Right, so there's the board. Tiny little thing. It's looking a bit beaten up, actually. Right. Hope this is going to work. Okay, I've built the cable. There's the cable. I've put it into a USB extension cable there. I found a connector, and I managed to find some 2mm ribbon cable, and I've just taken a DuPont set of wires here, soldered them on in order, and then I mapped the pin out on the SIDE3 to the signal. Legend on the board here, that's VCC, so that's not used. This is in-system programming, so we're going to power the cartridge from the by plugging it into the computer and actually turning it on. Now it's taken quite a long time to actually get to the point where I can attempt this, because even though installing the software and the drivers was relatively straightforward, I then realised, of course, that the GoWin flashing software does not accept JED files. That chip doesn't use JED files. It's a totally different platform. So I had to get in touch with ClownStrike and ask for the proper file, the version 1.3 file. I was a little bit worried at first because the initial reaction was that version 2.3 is all there is.
Are you serious?
But I found that a little bit difficult to believe because, of course, my GoWin SIDE3 cartridges had firmware, or whatever you want to call it, CPLD code version 1.3 on it for the past year, so it clearly exists. I was on the verge of a massive brain aneurysm, I think. But no, apparently the file exists. It was dug out. I'd be very bloody surprised if the source code for this particular revision, 1.3, still exists, actually. I can't understand the thinking behind completely abandoning and throwing away a prior version of something as important as this just because a new version is being produced, especially when the new version is loaded with problems.
What exactly does IT stand for? I've often wondered, but I never thought to ask.
Anyway, I had to upgrade the version of the program that I downloaded from the vendor's link in the little leaflet that came with the adapter, which admittedly was about 3 years old. Didn't actually support this particular version of the chip. So hopefully if I do a boundary scan here, it'll actually pick it up. It looks like it has, and apparently I've got to pick this one. There we go. And now, if I click on Configure Device, we want to be in embedded flash mode, we want Erase Program Verify, and I should be able to pick the side one. I've given them sensible names here, of course, so I can tell what's what. So that's version 2.3, which I want rid of. This is version 1.3, so I'm going to pick that one. And there you go, so it's gone on. And if I press start, it's working. It's actually flashing the cart. Brilliant. And it appears to have worked. Now if we go back to the machine, we'll power cycle the computer. Right, so now if I turn the computer on and I pick the SIDE3 loader, assuming it starts up. There's the SIDE3 loader. Okay, it's read the directory. Excellent. And if we go along here, yes! There you go, JED version 1.3. Now, strictly speaking, apparently, this isn't a JED with this particular chip. The things you learn after the event, it's done anyway. So let's see, let's see if the error's gone. Now, bear in mind, I haven't put the missing C30 capacitor back on this board yet. So let's have a look and see if it's fixed the problem. Right, there's no errors in that one. Remember, we were saying immediately seeing problems. That's if the thing even started up. It was going straight to the self-test sometimes. We were immediately seeing garbage in the directory here. But I'm not seeing garbage in the directory now. On the face of it, that looks like it's fixed it. But why don't we'll try the opposite. I'm going to flash the newer version to it now. Okay, so let's go back here. Let's pick the other JED. 2.3, configure device, so it's embedded flash mode. There we go, there we go. Right, so that should work. So we'll start it again. Flashing 2.3. That appears to have worked. Go back to the computer. Obviously, it's having flashed, it's blown up naturally. That's to be expected. Power cycle the computer. Turn the computer on again, go back into the loader, at least it started up. There we go, and we've immediately got crap in the directory. It's immediately broken it. So flashing version 2.3 of the CPLD code to the GoWin SIDE3 immediately fucked it up. And it's these constantly shifting sands of CPLD code revisions and hardware changes that make my life so difficult, because I've got to try and build a better user experience through software on top of this. And that's what causes arseholes like this to blame problems on software. Right, so let's rectify that. Let's put the other version back on. Version 1.3. Let's do that. Power cycle the computer again. So this is now back to version 1.3 of the CPLD code, back into the loader. And as I say, I haven't even put capacitor C30 back on the board. It doesn't look like it makes any difference, but I mean, I might put it back anyway. But yeah, so there you go. So what Lotharek is actually offering to do at the moment on his website is to basically take this cartridge, which is mine, which has capacitor C30 attached to it and the version 1.3 of the CPLD code on it, put version 2.3 on the chip and take capacitor C30 off and make it work like this one did before I downgraded it. So that's certainly very, very useful, isn't it? But let's go one step further. Let's see if this works now with my 600XL. So remember, the customer's cartridge had the same issues on my 600XL when you tried it before I did the downgrade on it. Full of errors in the directory listing. And yeah, there doesn't appear to be a problem at all. So the cartridge works perfectly well on my 600XL now as well. So after nearly 8 weeks of bullshit, the customer's cartridge, the second cartridge, which I've had to buy myself because I was advised that it would be easy to fix it by replacing the CPLD with a Lattice part, which didn't work, and it ended up killing his cartridge. So after 8 weeks nearly, we can actually give him the system that he expected to get. And now I'm able to rescue these cartridges to disinfect them of version 2.3 of the CPLD code. So if that's not conclusive, I don't know what the hell is. Even the different buffer chips made no difference whatsoever here. Whether or not C30 is attached or not doesn't make any measurable difference to its behaviour. It's the code on the CPLD. So all the stock that all the vendors have got at the moment has got the problem JED on it. Now, I'm not saying that it's going to act like this 100% of the time. It might work on your machine, maybe it works on stock machines, or maybe it works on machines that got the bloody O2 fixer in them, or SRAM, or whatever, something that more closely resembles whatever it is that Lotharek used to test this thing. It's clearly a regression. Clearly a regression. Right, so that looks to me like completely 100% conclusive, inarguable proof that the CPLD code caused all the problems here. Now, if you look back at the beginning of the video on, I think it was the 17th of May 2024, which is getting on for 2 months ago now. That's what I said. That was my initial conclusion as to what the problem was. And before anybody says, oh, well, John, why make a video about it? Would it not be more constructive to just tell the vendor about the issue and let them sort it out? Well, I did tell the vendor about the issue on the 17th of May 2024. I sent a detailed diagnosis of what the issue was, and Lotharek offered to post out a cable that would enable me to downgrade the code on the CPLD. We spoke about it again on the 25th of May 2024 when asked where the cable was coming from. I chased it up again on the 5th of June 2024, again on the 6th of June, again on the 19th of June, again on the 20th of June, and the most recent messages that I sent on the matter remain unread and have received no acknowledgement whatsoever. And what was the outcome of all that discussion? Still no cable, and he remains convinced that version 2.3 of the CPLD code should be applied to all cartridges. But of course, in the meantime, I had, oh, well, it could be a defective cartridge, it could be a dry joint on the BGA chip, it could be the buffer chips, it could be this, it could be that. Well, it isn't any of those things. It's the code on the CPLD. So all the stock being sold by all the vendors of this cartridge now has that version 2.3 code on the CPLD, on the GoWin chip. All of it. And any that were sold prior to the 20th of February 2024, which will have version 1.3 of the CPLD code on them, which, as I've just elaborately demonstrated, works. There's a product recall on those ones so that you can send them back to get them upgraded so that they work like the customers did when it first arrived here nearly 2 months ago. I just don't know what to say. So where do we go from here? Well, now I've got the equipment to actually downgrade these things. Thank God. Because I'm going to get a lot more of them through my hands, and if they don't work in my machines, it's very, very unlikely they're going to work in the customer machine after I've upgraded it. If you have one of these things, you're having problems with them, and you can't get any resolution with the vendor, I'll be perfectly happy to downgrade them here using this adapter for some nominal fee in the price of postage, I guess. I'll probably be doing it with all of the cartridges that come through my hands in the future, just an extra step that has to be done. Now, I noticed something else amusing the other day on Lotharek's social media page. He's actually produced purple Ultimate 1MB and Incognito boards. The Ultimate 1MB ones are rerouted, we knew that already. The purple Incognito board is described as Incognito Gold, calling to mind the nomenclature of Savo Gold and O2 Fixer Low Profile Professional Plus Gold, etc, etc, etc. Now, there was a time when I used to receive pre-production or production samples. In the past, it's made perfect sense to me that I've received pre-production or production samples of any redesigned hardware, not because I like receiving free stuff or that I need any more bloody prototype boards, but because I've been involved in these projects for absolutely years on end, and I am tasked with the job of developing and maintaining firmware for them. Not only that, not only have I got a rare insight into the actual hardware itself, but as an installer, I've probably installed more of these things and had more of them through my hands than anybody else apart from the people who actually make the damn things. But despite that, as of 2024, all that's changed. It seems that my opinion or any advice or testing data or recommendations or observations that I could provide are of no interest whatsoever. Or at least that's the impression I get when nobody told me in February 2024 that we're thinking of changing the CPLD code on the SIDE 3.2 cartridge with a GoWin chip because they think it's unstable, despite the fact I've had the same cartridge, an identical cartridge with CPLD code version 1.3 on it, here for the past year and never had a single bloody issue with it. No, the first I hear about all this is 3 months later when I receive a customer cartridge that has got this JED on that I've never even seen or heard of before. Nobody told me there were plans to change the SRAM chips on the older Ultimate 1MB boards, and I didn't hear about the plans to completely redesign it until later on. I still haven't been sent a pre-production or production sample of the redesigned Ultimate 1MB board so I can put it in a few machines and see if there's any problems. So the redesigned Ultimate 1MB board, it doesn't have any new functionality whatsoever. It's simply been rerouted so that it gets rid of the big coin cell battery on the bottom of the board, moves it to the smaller battery on the top now. It's got the Alliance SRAM on it now because presumably that's cheaper or easier to get hold of. So it's got different RAM, a different RTC battery, and some of them are purple. Now I have absolutely no doubt whatsoever that these purple boards will be more expensive than the stuff they replace when the old stock runs out. Mark my words, they will be more expensive. And you've already got people on social media going, wow, that looks amazing, I can't wait to buy one of those, but it's no different to the one it replaces. But anyway, I think we've covered enough in this video. If you've made it this far, I really appreciate you watching. I would absolutely welcome your comments down below, particularly if you've had one of these cartridges and you've had a good experience with it or a bad experience with it. I think if the more information we can gather, the better. And in fairness to Candle, there is apparently some interest in trying to figure out what went wrong. Why version 2.3, the SIDE 3 CPLD code appears to be causing problems, certainly here on any machine I try it on. So the more information we can gather, the better. So anybody who's got one of these things, you can just go on the info page on the SIDE 3 loader, check the version, and if you're having problems even after you've put a 74 F08 chip on the motherboard, etc, etc, and if that still isn't curing the issues, because it didn't cure the issues here, the first thing you should do is get in touch with the vendor, tell them the cartridge doesn't work properly, or get in touch with Lotharek directly, here's his contact page, and ask him why on earth the cartridge has been updated with CPLD code that is creating all kinds of problems which are immune to the 74 F08 chip modification. That is an indication that you need a downgrade on the CPLD code, in my opinion. So thanks again for watching. I want to thank everybody who interacts with the videos, everybody who leaves likes, etc, etc, anybody who shares the videos, and of course especially my loyal and generous patrons who keep this channel going and keep me motivated to continue making content. Thank you very much indeed. It is greatly appreciated. So depending on what kind of reaction I get to this video, I shudder to think actually, I will hopefully see you in the next video. So thanks again for watching, and bye bye for now.